Dr. Rao, I'm coming to you first. What should we realistically be expecting out of the Quad summit? Look, the leaders will say we are here to brainstorm. This is an important alliance as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned. It's just good for the leaders to meet annually and talk. But what should we expect out of it, given the circumstances that the world finds itself in?
Well, yes, good afternoon. And indeed, it is an important summit. We've been looking forward to it. In my perspective, there are certain things that I think by now that should be driven home, right? As to one, we should be clear on the context in which the summit is taking place. So what is the context? There are two important contexts, in my opinion. One is that context which came just before the war, which was the US Indo-Pacific strategy, laid out by the Biden administration in February of, this year. And which was followed by the infamous military operation, Russia's military operation in Ukraine. Okay, so these are, these two, so to say, important contexts. There are several more. There's also what the Europeans are doing in the Indo-Pacific that's important, but that's pretty much can be understood as a secondary initiative to what the US is doing. So, taking from there, I think we should be realistic about the fact that Quad is not going to be a security alliance. In substance, right? I mean, in substance, it may have, the ambition to deter, so to say, China by containing China's footprint, rising footprint in that region. It's a very, very important region. But Quad per se cannot be a security alliance, and the partner that is most wary of, treating Quad as a security alliance is India itself. Okay, so we have to keep that really important. So now the other question is, where will the teeth come from if it has to make any sense? You see, let us understand that US's Indo-Pacific strategy has about 5 cornerstones. One is a free and open Indo-Pacific. Then it is about building consensus within and beyond the region. It is about driving prosperity, bolstering security, and building collective resilience to all these transnational threats, whether security, resilient supply initiatives, or whether it's climate change, vaccine, etc. The thing is that the good part that has happened right as we are getting into the Quad summit is that while we know that security is not really going to be the main domain of talks and discussions, but in the bilateral relationship that India has with all the Quad partners, right, whether it's India, Japan, India, Australia, I mean, we have seen a significant deepening of relationships there, whether it's about economy or about, strategic, so to say, cooperation. That is very, very important also with India, US. Now, this is a time when, like I say, that the most important thing that will actually sort of benefit, the Quad would perhaps be an economic framework that has been lacking from the Indo-Pacific so far. And, Joe Biden is going to unveil what is famously known as this Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, okay, very soon. It is good. Indo-Pacific Economic Forum has to be made in sense with the Build Back Better World, that initiative. It has to make sense with EU's global gateway, about 300 billion euros that EU has committed to that. So it is of kind of coming together of all these things that are actually going to provide the economic base on which Quad can actually take off. Because let's be clear that Quad is not about security, at least in the visible format. In the visible format, in substance, in the deep down substance, I'm sure there's security talks happening. But in the visible format of it, what is something that can be seen, I think the economic portion is very important. So what is to interest to me right now is to see what really is the substance, that we will see in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, because it is not really a trade deal, it is not really a free trade agreement, and there is a lot of lack of appetite within the US, okay, to go for something that works on lowering tariff barriers, etc. So if US doesn't want to become, want other parties to let access to their markets, then what really is the viability? But having said that, like I said, and I'm just sort of concluding what are my point, which is that Indo-Pacific Economic Framework has to make sense with the EU's global gateway, and that has to make sense with the Build Back Better initiative, and all of that perhaps with Japan taking lead with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, right? Now, all of that is going to give Quad the kind of economic base, for taking off. So let's see.
Okay, let's see. Yes, Prabhudeval, coming to this discussion, please. I remember when AUKUS was announced, the military alliance between the United States, Australia, and UK. There was much talk about What will the Quad even do? What does the Quad even need? Has the Quad been, superseded, as it were, by AUKUS, etc.? Now, as we see this second in-person Quad summit take place in Japan, for you, what will be the big significance of it? Not just what gets talked about, but even the optics.
Well, first of all, let me say that I agree with Dr. Rao that Quad is not principally a security alliance. It is much more than that. It is an economic alliance, though, as she pointed out, in a very subtle manner, security issues will still be there in the background. Now, one reason why India has been extremely careful about not getting it labeled as a security framework is because of the relationship with China. We already have an antagonistic relationship, and we do not want to worsen it for this reason. We have made it very clear that as we see it, Quad is not targeted against any other country. But at the same time, Quad remains, no doubt, a security dialogue and is engaged in framing something relating to security in the Indo Pacific region in a very subtle manner. Now, let me give you an example. An outstanding example of this is Japan's recent development aid of $31.5 million for the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now, what is going to happen there? The Japan International Cooperation Agency signed a deal with India in March to reduce the dependence of the islands on generating energy through the use of diesel fuel and to convert to renewable energy, solar energy. The Andamans are being developed in a very subtle manner as a port which could service the navies of the Quad countries and also to facilitate joint exercises whenever these become necessary. India and Japan recently held the Milan exercise. The Malabar exercise is also held from time to time, annually, in fact. So there is a likelihood that the Andamans will be developed as a port where the facilitation of the holding of an exercise like Malabar will be taking place.
Yeah.
So while we are only fulfilling our target of switching over from the use of fossil fuels to renewable energy, there is no denying the fact that this sort of Japanese investment is going to help in bolstering India's capabilities in using the Andamans for naval purposes.
Okay.
This is something which the Chinese realized. But then we have made it clear we are doing it for purposes of fulfilling our obligations in terms of the climate accord. Now, Japan and India have overtly a very economically strong relationship, which is not targeted against any other country. But there is no doubt that the manner in which the Andamans tower over the Bay of Bengal and overlook the access provided by the Malacca Straits and the 6-degree line and the 9-degree line between the Bay of Bengal and the South China Sea is something that would not have been lost in the Chinese. So the fact is that the security aspect of the relationship cannot be overlooked. There is a geostrategic overtone which is part of the overall economic dialogue. And of course, it is to keep in check an increasingly assertive China.
So you're speaking about China and China making headlines on 2 counts. I'll request both of you to stay with us. I'm first going to read out how China has reacted to the Quad summit. What China is saying is that this summit of Quad leaders in Japan is bound to fail as it is vigorously promoted by Washington to contain Beijing. Now, what China is also saying is that the Indo-Pacific strategy is causing more and more vigilance and concerns in the international community, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. He's